Your soulmate is about to surprise you in the sweetest way. Your soulmate is about to surprise you. Here's what happened. The next morning arrived with an energy that felt impossible to ignore. Something inside your soulmate had shifted overnight. The hesitation that once slowed every decision had quietly disappeared, replaced by a calm determination that even surprised them. They reached for the handwritten note again, unfolded it carefully, and read every line as though they were seeing it for the first time. Instead of changing the words, they smiled. It was exactly what they wanted you to hear. But before they could move forward, an unexpected interruption appeared. Someone close to them asked, "Are you really going through with this?" The room became silent. Your soulmate looked out the window, took a slow breath, and answered with complete confidence, "I've waited long enough." That single sentence changed the direction of the entire day. Stay close, because one tiny decision made only minutes later carried more meaning than anyone realized. As the hours passed, every step seemed to guide them toward the surprise they had imagined for so long. They visited one meaningful place after another, collecting small details that only the two of you would truly understand. A familiar melody played through a nearby cafe. A flower caught their attention because it reminded them of something you once mentioned without thinking twice. Even the weather seemed perfectly timed, as gentle sunlight broke through the clouds just as they finished putting everything together. It wasn't coincidence anymore. It felt like every little moment was encouraging them to keep going. If this story is making you smile, sharing it with someone who enjoys heartfelt stories and subscribing for more journeys like this helps keep these moments alive. But don't go anywhere, because the sweetest surprise still hasn't been revealed. There's one detail your soulmate refuses to leave out, and it's the detail that transforms a thoughtful gesture into something unforgettable. As evening slowly returned, your soulmate stood quietly in front of a place filled with memories. Their hands trembled, not because they were afraid, but because they genuinely cared about getting this moment right. They reached into their pocket, touched the folded note once more, and whispered to themselves, "This has to feel real." Then, just before taking another step, something completely unexpected happened. Their phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a reminder. It was a memory from exactly 1 year ago, a photograph connected to a moment you had both unknowingly treasured. They stared at the image, smiled with watery eyes, and suddenly understood what had been missing all along. The surprise wasn't supposed to be about a gift. It was supposed to recreate a feeling, the exact feeling that first made them believe the two of you shared something extraordinary. With renewed confidence, they turned around and headed toward one final destination. What they found there would become the missing piece of a surprise so heartfelt that it could change everything, and the next chapter begins at the very moment they arrive. Something slipped quietly into place long before anyone realized a surprise was already taking shape. It wasn't announced. It wasn't posted for the world to see. It lived inside tiny decisions, a message typed and erased, a smile that appeared for no reason, a long pause after hearing your name. Somewhere, while you were busy wondering whether anything had changed, someone was carefully building a moment they hoped you would never forget. But there was one unexpected detail that made everything far more meaningful than it first appeared. Stay with this, because the next few moments reveal why nothing about this was ordinary. Picture a peaceful afternoon washed in warm sunlight. Cars drift past without urgency. Coffee cools on a small table by the window while your soulmate stares into the distance, holding a notebook they haven't opened in months. Their expression isn't filled with confusion anymore. It's filled with quiet certainty. For the first time in a long while, they stop questioning what their heart has been trying to say. Instead, they begin planning. Not something extravagant. Not something designed to impress strangers. Something deeply personal. Something that could only matter because it was created with you in mind. Every small choice becomes another piece of the surprise. They replay conversations you may have forgotten. They remember a tiny joke that made you laugh longer than expected. They remember your favorite color appearing in a random story. They remember the way your voice softened during one unforgettable moment. None of those memories disappeared. They became clues guiding every decision. Then something happened that nobody expected. A close friend noticed the change and quietly asked, "Why do you look happier than you've looked in months?" Your soulmate didn't answer immediately. They simply smiled, the kind of smile that says everything before a single word is spoken. That silence carried more truth than any explanation ever could. And believe it or not, that conversation became the final push they needed. There's another piece to this story that changes everything, so don't leave just yet. Later that evening, the atmosphere feels completely different. The city lights begin reflecting across quiet streets while your soulmate walks with renewed confidence, no longer distracted by doubts that once followed every step. They stop outside a small shop, hesitate for only a second, then walk inside with purpose. It isn't about buying something expensive. It's about finding something meaningful enough to say what words alone never could. Time seems to slow as they compare possibilities, imagining your reaction instead of their own. Every choice leads back to the same question: will this make them feel truly seen? That question becomes the heart of the surprise. Before leaving, they fold a handwritten note and place it somewhere safe, promising themselves it will only be shared when the timing feels absolutely right. They don't know the exact day yet, but they know the moment is closer than ever. And just as they step outside beneath the glowing evening sky, their phone lights up with an unexpected reminder connected to you. They freeze. They look at the screen. Then they laugh softly to themselves, almost as if the universe had whispered, "Now is the time." What they decide in the very next moment becomes the sweetest part of this entire story, and you won't believe where that decision leads next. Just before the door opened, an unexpected sound made your soulmate stop in their tracks. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a familiar laugh drifting through the air, the kind of laugh that instantly brought back a memory they thought time had quietly carried away. They closed their eyes for a second, letting that feeling settle in. Suddenly, everything they had planned no longer felt like a simple surprise. It became a chance to recreate a moment that had once changed both of your lives without either of you realizing it. But there was one final piece still missing. And finding it would lead them somewhere they never expected. They walked slowly through streets glowing beneath the soft evening lights, noticing little things they would have ignored just weeks before. A musician playing an old melody. A couple laughing over dessert. A child handing a flower to someone they loved. Each scene reminded them that the greatest memories are rarely the biggest ones, they're the quiet moments that stay in your heart forever. That's when they stepped into a small local bookstore. They weren't looking for anything expensive. They were searching for one specific item, a journal almost identical to one you once mentioned wanting to fill with dreams, adventures, and memories. They found it tucked away on a lower shelf, almost hidden from view. The instant they picked it up, they smiled as though destiny had quietly placed it there just for this moment. But then something even more remarkable happened. Inside the front cover was a handwritten quote left by a previous owner: "The best surprises are the ones that remind someone how deeply they are loved." Your soulmate stood completely still. They hadn't expected those words, yet they described exactly what they had been trying to create all along. There was still one detail you haven't noticed, and it would become the heart of everything. Leaving the bookstore, they carried the journal with extraordinary care, as if it already held priceless memories. They found a quiet bench overlooking the city lights and opened the first page. Instead of writing a long letter, they began filling it with small moments only the two of you would understand. Favorite places, tiny inside jokes, dreams they hoped to share someday, and blank pages waiting for new memories that hadn't happened yet. By the time they finished, the sky had turned deep blue, with the first stars beginning to appear overhead. They closed the journal, held it against their heart, and smiled with a confidence that hadn't existed for a very long time. Then their phone vibrated one more time. This message was different. It wasn't planned. It wasn't expected. It contained only a single sentence from someone who knew both of you: "If you're going to do this, tomorrow is the perfect day." Your soulmate looked toward the horizon, took one steady breath, and quietly whispered, "Tomorrow changes everything." What awaited them when the sun came up would become the sweetest surprise either of you could have imagined, and the story is only getting started. Morning arrived with the kind of stillness that only comes before something unforgettable. Your soulmate woke earlier than usual, not because an alarm forced them to, but because excitement refused to let them sleep another minute. They looked over everything one last time: the journal, the carefully folded note, and one final keepsake they had chosen at the last second. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't perfect. But it carried a story only the two of you could understand. They smiled, slipped everything into a small bag, and whispered, "Today is the day." As they stepped outside, the world felt different. Even the ordinary seemed brighter, as though every street and every passing face was quietly cheering them forward. Yet just as they began their journey, an unexpected detour appeared. A familiar road was closed, forcing them to take another route. At first it felt frustrating, until that unexpected path led them directly past a place filled with memories they hadn't visited in years. They stopped without thinking. Sometimes the sweetest surprises aren't changed by delays, they're completed because of them. Stay close, because what happened there became the emotional center of this entire story. Standing in front of that familiar place, your soulmate found themselves smiling at memories they thought had faded. They remembered laughter that echoed between ordinary conversations. They remembered moments that seemed small at the time but later became impossible to forget. One memory after another returned, each one reminding them why they had never truly stopped believing in this connection. Inspired, they opened the journal once again and added one final page, a promise instead of a memory. It was simple, honest, and completely from the heart. If you've been enjoying this journey, sharing it with someone who believes in meaningful stories and subscribing for more cinematic moments helps these stories continue reaching people who need them. But don't go anywhere, because the biggest surprise hasn't been revealed yet. Just as your soulmate closed the journal, a gentle breeze carried the folded note from their hand. It drifted only a few feet before landing beside a park bench where an older couple quietly smiled at each other without saying a word. Watching that silent exchange reminded your soulmate of something important. The strongest feelings are often expressed in the simplest ways. With renewed confidence, they picked up the note, carefully placed it back inside the journal, and continued toward the place they had chosen for the surprise. Every step felt lighter now. Every doubt had disappeared. As the destination finally came into view, they slowed down, taking in every detail so they would remember this moment forever. They checked the time, straightened the bag on their shoulder, and took one deep breath. Then something completely unexpected happened. Before they could take another step, they noticed a small envelope resting exactly where they planned to leave their own surprise. It had no name on the front. No explanation. Just a single handwritten sentence: "Sometimes two hearts prepare the same surprise at the very same time." Your soulmate stared at those words in complete disbelief, realizing this story might be far bigger than they had ever imagined. The person who left that mysterious envelope could change everything in the next chapter. The envelope rested there so naturally that, for a moment, your soulmate wondered if it had always belonged in that exact spot. They looked around, expecting to see someone walking away, but the pathway was quiet. Trees swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. Birds crossed the bright sky without a sound. Whoever had placed it there was already gone. Slowly, they reached down, turned the envelope over, and noticed something almost impossible to ignore. The paper carried the same soft blue color as the journal they had chosen only the night before. It wasn't an exact match anyone would notice at first glance, but to your soulmate, it felt like another piece of an invisible puzzle. They didn't open it immediately. Instead, they smiled with quiet curiosity, tucked it safely beside the journal, and whispered, "Maybe this moment is meant to unfold one step at a time." That decision would lead to something far sweeter than they could have imagined. Don't look away now, because the next few minutes reveal the most heartfelt turn in the entire story. Walking deeper into the park, they arrived at the place they had imagined for weeks. A peaceful overlook where the sunlight reflected across the water like scattered gold. It wasn't crowded. It wasn't decorated. It didn't need to be. The beauty came from the memories already waiting there. Your soulmate carefully placed the journal on a nearby bench and slipped the handwritten note inside its front cover. Then they stepped back, imagining you discovering it page by page, smiling at familiar stories, laughing at forgotten jokes, pausing at dreams that had never been spoken aloud. Every blank page waiting at the end quietly said the same thing: "Our best memories haven't happened yet." Just then, they remembered the mysterious envelope. Curiosity finally won. They opened it carefully, expecting an explanation. Instead, they found a small blank card with only one sentence written in elegant handwriting: "The sweetest surprise is never the gift, it's realizing someone has been thinking about you all along. Your soulmate laughed softly, not because the message answered every question, but because it perfectly described everything they had been trying to express from the beginning. Before leaving this story behind, there's one final piece you still haven't seen. As the afternoon faded into a warm, glowing sunset, your soulmate sat quietly beside the journal, watching families stroll past and friends share easy conversations. For the first time in a long while, there was no rush. No second-guessing. No fear that the moment had to be perfect. They finally understood that the surprise wasn't built in a single day, it had been growing through every memory, every quiet hope, and every decision to keep believing in something beautiful. They stood, took one last look at the place where everything had come together, and smiled with complete peace. Then, almost unbelievably, their phone lit up once again. A new notification appeared with a date circled on the screen. A date connected to a memory only you and your soulmate would recognize. They didn't hesitate this time. They looked toward the horizon and quietly said, "That's when everything begins." And with that, they started walking toward the next chapter, carrying not just a surprise, but a future they could finally see taking shape. A gentle breeze followed every step as your soulmate walked away, but something inside them whispered to turn around one more time. They did. The bench, the journal, the quiet overlook, and the golden light reflecting across the water all seemed to pause together, as if the moment wanted to be remembered forever. They smiled, not because everything had gone exactly as planned, but because they finally realized the sweetest surprises are never perfect, they're personal. Then they noticed one last detail they hadn't seen before. Tucked beneath the journal was a tiny pressed flower, carefully preserved between two thin pieces of paper. No name. No explanation. Just a simple reminder that beautiful things often arrive quietly. Your soulmate picked it up with a smile, slipped it inside the final blank page, and whispered, "Now it's complete." But the story still held one last surprise that neither of you could have predicted. That evening, they returned home carrying a heart that felt lighter than it had in a very long time. Instead of replaying old doubts, they began imagining new beginnings. They pictured the first smile. The first conversation after everything had changed. The laughter that would come naturally because nothing would need to be forced anymore. They looked once more at the journal before placing it somewhere safe. Every page carried hope instead of fear. Every memory pointed toward tomorrow instead of yesterday. Then their phone vibrated one final time. It wasn't a reminder. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a simple message from someone who had unknowingly witnessed the journey from the beginning. I don't know what you're planning, but I've never seen you this genuinely happy. Your soulmate read the words twice before quietly replying, because this isn't just a surprise anymore. It's a promise. In that instant, they understood something that had taken months to learn: real connections aren't measured by grand gestures. They're built through thoughtful moments that continue long after the surprise is over. As night settled peacefully across the city, the stars appeared one by one, almost like tiny lights celebrating a new chapter. Your soulmate stood by the window, holding the journal close, already imagining the day it would finally reach your hands. They weren't hoping for perfection. They weren't expecting a movie scene. They simply hoped that when you opened those pages, you would feel the care, the patience, and the genuine affection woven into every word. Because that had always been the real surprise. Not a gift. Not a destination. Not a dramatic moment. It was discovering that someone had quietly chosen you, remembered you, and believed in the possibility of creating beautiful memories together, one thoughtful step at a time. And somewhere beyond this peaceful night, a new morning was already waiting, ready to turn that heartfelt surprise into the beginning of a story neither of you would ever want to end.